Hello, everyone. Welcome to Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. I'm Kate,
And I'm Garrett.
and tonight we're going to review a Nolan movie, Interstellar.
Yeah, this will be our second one from Christopher Nolan. This is a pretty good one. I enjoyed this
Yeah,
movie.
yeah. It brought back. I saw this originally in theaters when it came out, and I largely forgot most of what happened in it, except the main plot points, and I found it to be an incredibly emotional movie. So, which is strange and unusual for science fiction.
Yeah, I remember seeing this one when it came out, and I was very sad in the theaters seeing it. There's some hard-hitting moments in it. And at the time, and I think even now, some amazing effects and spectacles, and really, really great performance for Matthew McConaughey from his Renaissance era, and all around very, very fun film.
Yeah, but first, what's on TV?
I've been watching a lot of TV this week.
Woohoo! TV watching.
Yes, and so I started on Hulu because I can't get my HBO to work on the TV. It keeps wanting me to make an account, but we have an account, so I don't understand it. Um, and this is a show that one of my friends watched a couple years ago, Only Murders in the Building. And it is a kind of a parody on true crime and true crime podcasting detectives, where we have Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez. They're investigating a crime that takes place in their building in New York City. And
Oh, the scary place.
yeah, they play on that a little bit, but they only ever are in this one grand building that has like, the guards and doormen and shit. It's not a grimy New York show. Um,
Yeah. I want to know, like, and listeners comment if you have any good sources on this. Like, what kind of terrible PR campaign did New York City have in the 80s and 90s that forever scarred the entirety of the Midwest into thinking that it was just the devil's lair?
it was probably Big Corn. They were probably out there peddling the narrative that the big city is scary, so stay on your farm, children, and grow corn.
Yeah, I was thinking it was Escape from New York, but I mean, Big Corn is likely. We should review Escape from New York. That's a good one for the
That is a
pod.
good one. We need Kurt Russell,
Yeah, we
because
might need to have a Kurt Russell month.
because I look, I went to see a Fast and the Furious movie, and my friend didn't tell me that Kurt Russell was in it. And when Kurt Russell came on screen, I just audibly yelled out in the movie theater, "It's Kurt Russell!" because I was excited. Because he's just great. He's just fun. He's a dumb, goofy action guy. It's great.
Would he be considered a himbo?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Like without question, that era, yes. Um, because I got into an argument with one of my professors in college about Big Trouble in Little China because he just didn't understand it at all. And
He
like,
didn't understand the allure of the green-eyed girl?
well, I don't know. I don't know about that. We didn't talk about that. But he didn't understand that like the whole thing was really a satire on the American action hero, and how Kurt Russell's like an incompetent himbo star in that who thinks he's the main character and he's not. And it's just like, yeah, that's the point. He just sucks.
Yeah, I think the truck is the main star, right?
Uh, um,
You don't have to answer that. We can move on. It's fine.
so you watched some TV this week.
Yeah, so this week I finished season 2 of The Bear. I gotta say, this is a good show. To highly recommend. I know Garrett already talked about it once, but I wanted to give my 2 cents. And I have to say, if you work in the food industry, you're gonna hate this show. It is, the entirety is getting, trapped in a walk-in and being having a panic attack. I mean, that is the entirety of the show. So I gotta say, it is worth a watch. It is fun. It is emotional. It is well written. The holiday episode, as Garrett told me, was as stressful as can be. And it was worth every minute because it really is so well done. The characters are so well fleshed out, a very diverse cast. It puts you in Chicago. You're in Chicago, you're eating those wet sandwiches and the streets, the L, like it's everything. And I wish that more shows did a better job of putting you in a place. Like this place puts you in Chicago, like The Wire puts you in Baltimore. And there aren't a lot of shows that can really like nail you to a location. Like Mayor of Easttown was another one where, and that's local to me in Philly. It really captures the essence of a location as being a side character on this show, and I really did like it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you stuck with it and kept watching and got to see the great Christmas episode.
Yeah, it is one of those shows that I could not watch every night. I will say that most of the episodes are only 30 minutes. So if you have only short time, maybe lunch break, maybe after you put the kids to bed, that kind of situation, it's a great show for that because it doesn't take up that much time. And it's not, an hour, 15-minute show that you gotta sit down and watch. So something to think about. And I mean, it is sometimes funny.
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely some humor in there.
I would not call it a comedy. Definitely a drama.
Yeah, yeah, I that's accurate. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm sure if there's more, I imagine there's going to be a third season.
I
I,
hope so.
I don't know for certain. But if there is, we'll definitely cover it because uh, did this hold up as being, what your friend said of being on the level of The Wire, being like that much of a classic show?
No,
Okay,
but I mean that's a high bar for me. I think that in the Caitlin ranking of television programs, The Wire is way up there, and I think that that's just a pedestal that's not going to be reached. But it did give me a lot of great things. Like the location, the characters, the chemistry between them, the anxiety. I would put it up there on Caitlin's level of television shows. It's up there with Chernobyl. I'm putting it with Chernobyl on
okay,
the ranking system,
right.
but not quite as good as The Wire, not quite as good as Deadwood. Um, it's better than The Sopranos. I'll give it that.
Okay, that's fair. Well, I watched this on television yesterday. So, um, when I was growing up, there was this show. It was called MXC, and we watched this on television all the time, didn't we?
Yeah, we sure did. It was always on.
Yeah.
Like on like Spike TV or some channel that doesn't
Yeah,
exist anymore.
yeah. That's where it was on. And so MXC was a overdub of a Japanese show called Takeshi's Castle back in the late 80s, early 90s. So this is a reboot of it. So 34, 35 years have passed since the show first aired, and they've decided to redo it. And it's stupid, it's fun, and it's the same formula. You get a bunch of people, you make them climb on all these weird like dumb jungle gym things. You shoot at them with water cannons. You make them jump over the stones and they eat shit. It's great. Like it's just fun.
So is it overdubbed or is it translated correctly?
So this is translated correctly. There are
Okay.
subtitles on there that are from the Japanese,
Okay.
and
Because I think maybe it sometime during the pandemic, one of us brought up MXC, and we decided to like rewatch some episodes, and we found it to be less than tasteful in hindsight.
Oh
So
yeah, no, no, this was a product of the early 2000s where like the joke was low-key racism, like that was the joke.
yeah, and it did not it in the 2020 moment it did not do well, and we did not watch many episodes, and maybe we didn't even laugh much, even though people were falling in on their face in the mud pit or
So,
whatever.
so one of the problems with it is it's horribly oversaturated. All of the sets are like really bright and colorful. It's not the just like spray painted black foam core buildings that they had or like, plywood stuff. Like they put some effort, they made it, very, very colorful and like the
So
cameras,
almost Squid Game like.
yeah, almost Squid Game like. And it's oversaturated as all hell. But I think now, if because I was riffing on it when I was watching it, of if I were to do my own MXC overdub, and I think it could be just as funny, but you just wouldn't be able to do the same jokes that they did back then, which again were mostly racist.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good thing. But that would be funny. And these all come from that era of Japanese game shows of just bizarre different competitions and stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
and MXC was kind of making fun of that on top of making fun of Takeshi's Castle to begin with.
yeah,
And there was also a lot of like gay jokes too. I remember that. Because the hosts were always making jokes that were off color in that direction
yeah,
in
yeah.
MXC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be doing that now.
No. And then they didn't go well. They were not good jokes. It was it was very disappointing to, rewatch something from your childhood and find out that it is just pretty vile.
Yeah, yeah, but the game show, that sort of thing is, fun.
Yeah,
And
yeah, the game show is great, and that part held up, and
yeah,
like the interviewer, interviewing the contestants, like, it was occasionally funny, but the real fun was seeing the people dress up in funny costumes and run through an obstacle course and just fail completely, but then sometimes make it. It's kind of like
yeah,
watching the early stages of Ninja Warrior, and but more fun.
yeah. So all that's there, the funny costumes, the people. Um, and it's interesting you bring up Ninja Warrior because uh, in America we had Wipeout and Ninja Warrior, and Wipeout got sued by the people who made Takeshi's Castle because they were like, "You've just copied our show," which is fair.
But didn't MXC literally copy their show?
So MXC had it was made in conjunction with them. It was made, I guess, with their permission. I went and
So
did.
they approved the jokes.
They approved the use of the material. I don't know how much they approved the jokes, but I guess they. So MXE changed the format in which it was described, which is what was confusing to me watching this remake or the reboot, because I always thought MXC was just people going and doing these challenges, but in the Takeshi's Castle is a whole narrative of completing these challenges to get to the titular castle. Um,
Oh,
so
okay.
it's different, but it uses the like probably less used footage because there are 100 contestants and they're filming every single one just in case something really awesome happens. So there's just going to be shitloads left on the cutting room floor because you're not going to have time in an hour-long episode to have all of that content.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, in Americans, our attention span is short. Our commercial breaks need to be long. Uh, our jokes need to be racist, apparently. So,
Yeah, it was definitely made for us.
It was made for an early 2000s audience.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you have Amazon Prime Video, yeah, and you're interested in this, go and check it out. Have some laughs. Watch a person in a mascot costume climb a wall. It's pretty good.
Cool.
So that'll bring us to our main event, Interstellar, the 2014 film. It stars Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Jessica Chastain, Michael Caine, and surprise Matt Damon. Uh,
Definitely a surprise, Matt Damon.
I was surprised in the movie theater, as was my dad that I went to see this with. We were
I
not
don't
expecting Matt
remember.
Damon.
Yeah, I don't remember being surprised, but yeah, yeah, it worked so well, and especially was this. This was just before The Martian, right?
I want to say so. I want to say The Martian came out later.
Yeah, because Matt Damon just makes a good space guy.
Yeah. So Christopher Nolan had Matthew McConaughey in the film because he wanted him to be the everyman, just like somebody
Hmm.
everyone could relate to. And in many ways, Matthew McConaughey is. He doesn't come across as being the uh, huge science guy or the like mechanic farmer guy. He's very
Or like
general.
the space explorer guy, like that Matt Damon is. Like
Yeah,
he doesn't have that. He definitely has the everyman. He has a ruggedness to him. He has, a background in the Space Force, so like or the military, so he knows how to fly a spaceship. We'll get into like some of that whole stuff later, but yeah, I think that Matthew McConaughey being just like an American guy and Anne Hathaway being the American girl and Matt Damon being the neurotic space dude, I think that whole works really well together.
yeah. I think they have some really good chemistry between the actors and in the scenes. Um, they do well. So to get into the numbers, this film made in total $773 million after it was re-released in 2014. And this made it the 10th highest grossing film of 2014. And interestingly, it is the only wholly original thing from 2014 in the top 10 highest grossing films, which is disgusting.
What were the other films?
So in 2014, we were at the absolute like height of, well, not the absolute height, but we were in the eventual climb to Marvel's Infinity Saga.
Ah,
So
yeah.
the number one film, interestingly, was Transformers: Age of Extinction, which
Oh
is
God.
maybe the third or fourth film based on Hasbro's Transformers toys.
I
Uh,
think that's the one with the skyscraper that falls in half and everybody's inside it and not dying.
sure. Uh,
Very unbelievable. Didn't
uh,
like that at all.
that film grossed more than $1 billion and became the 10th highest grossing film of all time.
Well, that's terrible.
Yeah, apparently the Transformers movies are really big in China. Um,
Well, I mean, it makes sense, like if you think about them as like, like the Fast and Furious movies, or like I mean, they're if they could be thought of as basically like kids movies, but for like a little bit older kids, like okay, fine. But they are just not cinematic masterpieces. The effects and physics bother me, like, yeah. What
yeah,
else was in 2014?
so coming in at number two was the finale of the Hobbit trilogy, The Battle of the Five Armies, which
Hmm.
got really close to the billion.
Also a movie I didn't like, sadly.
Yeah, I really think the Hobbit movies should have been two movies, which they were originally supposed to be. with Guillermo del Toro attached to direct, and then the studio decided they didn't want him, so they brought Peter Jackson in, who had no time to prep anything, and it really became a shit show.
Well, we'll review those someday because I might not like them, but they're worth talking about.
Yeah. Well, we really like Lord of the Rings, and seeing The Hobbit kind of falter was hard to watch.
Definitely.
Uh, Other things that came out in 2014 on this top 10 list are Guardians of the Galaxy, Maleficent, which is a remake of Sleeping Beauty, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, one part of the Hunger Games, an X-Men movie, Captain America movie, a sequel to a remake of Planet of the Apes, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is not the ones with Tobey Maguire, but the ones with Andrew Garfield. So,
Yeah, so that's two Spider-Man ago.
no, yes, that is the second, maybe even because there's
Don't count Spider-Man, you'll hurt yourself.
either that or go to sleep. So clearly coming from 2014, this is, probably one of the better movies.
Yeah, it's certainly the most original out of what you've listed, and while not a blockbuster in the blockbuster sense of that all of those movies were,
Yes.
a blockbuster that's actually worth watching.
Yeah, and I think we see the same thing with Oppenheimer that just came out, is it might have underperformed against, some of the other big things that are coming out, but like it's artistic, it's its own, well, it's not original, but it's its own thing. It's not, it's not the franchise appeal that I think is what made every single one of those movies we just listed so popular, is the fact that, like, oh, if you're interested in the Hunger Games, you have to go and watch this. If you've been watching the X-Men movies, you have to watch this. If you want to know what happens next in Spider-Man or in The Hobbit or see a conclusion, you got to go and watch those movies. There's less of a stake here.
Yeah, it's interesting too that you have so much investment in those movies and in those movies and those series is that, even if you started watching some of those series when you were like in high school and you might not care as much anymore, by the time you get to the third or fourth one, you still go and see it because it's something to do and you do want to get that closure. And, while that is a good marketing ploy, it doesn't necessarily result in the best movies making the best amount of money.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at it. So the start of the Marvel movies, Iron Man came out in 2008 when I was 11. So like these sort of movies are something that I've been watching the whole time. So it's like, yeah, those are just kind of a part of your life. That's just how movies are now.
Yeah, and I think that's my biggest problem with the Marvel movies is that, there've been times in my life where I have not had the time to watch, you know, four movies a year as part of a series, and if you get behind, you get so far behind you don't have any clue about what's going on anymore. So it's not ideal. There's just so much investment that has to be involved.
Yeah, there's way too much in my
Yeah.
mind.
Well, and I've never seen the original Iron Man, so that is probably the original stepping stone to me not being a fan of Marvel because I missed out on one of the building blocks.
I mean, yeah, that's it's it's like a Jenga tower. Like you can remove some of them, but if you remove too many, it all falls apart.
Yeah. But anyway, Interstellar.
Yeah, so this is not yet part of any cinematic universe, but we're waiting, Christopher Nolan, if you want to make more of them. Um, so a little bit of history on the movie. Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan's brother, um, he's made a big name for himself. At this point, he had been a writer on the Dark Knight trilogy for all of those movies. and he wrote the script for Interstellar in 2007. So about 7 years before the movie actually came out. Um, he worked with Kip Thorne, who is a physicist. They won the Nobel laureate in physics in 2017, and they served as the scientific consultants on this movie. So they worked together. Um, and Jonathan Nolan, he studied relativity at Caltech, which is a big kind of science plot in this film. So he had been working and very passionate about this, and suggested that his brother Christopher Nolan be brought on board, and he became an executive producer and then a director. Before this, Steven Spielberg was set to direct, but he moved his production company from Paramount to Disney, so he wasn't a part of the conversation anymore. And I think this movie would have been a whole lot different had Steven Spielberg been involved the whole time.
Yeah, I think that would be a different movie. But I think that, some of the things that make it a good movie, the emotional aspects, are something that Steven Spielberg does do very well. So I think that while it would have been different, I think it would have still been good.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think Steven Spielberg would have done well with this idea. Especially with how well he incorporated, because this is something we'll talk about a bit later, but in terms of the effects, like Steven Spielberg at that time was still, doing a combination of like, the practical and digital effects, like in Jurassic Park, which was, a decade before this, but it's that idea. And I don't think he's really done the big space film. Um, and this could have been a great point for that. Um, Another note about production, Christopher Nolan got into contact with Ken Burns, who makes documentaries and things, and they used interview segments about the Dust Bowl for video segments at the beginning that reference a similar event that takes place in the future once we cause the collapse of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I thought that those little vignettes were very nice, and I knew that they were from that documentary because I'm a nerd and I've watched all of Ken Burns' documentaries, and that one's a good one.
So I watched this movie with subtitles because I watch things with subtitles. And the opening subtitles list one of the speakers as Old Murphy, and that kind of like, I won't say it ruins the reveal at the end that she's still
Ooh.
kicking, but like it's very odd to have that as the subtitle.
Yeah, why did they need to just do that? And why not just say something else? Like
Yeah,
even her last name, like Mrs., whatever their last name was or something. Like,
uh,
ew.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. It's obviously you want to give the actress credit for that scene, so that's probably why the name is in the subtitle. But all I don't know. It was a weird choice. Like that was a weird conscious choice, and I think it would have been better to leave that anonymous there. Um,
Hmm.
so, do we want to talk a little bit about the plot, or go into some of our slides first?
Let's talk about the plot up until we get to space
Okay.
because I think that is interesting and kind of unusual.
Yeah. So, our story begins, and we have Matthew McConaughey is a retired space pilot because we've stopped going to space. We've stopped the machine that is the industrial war complex to focus on providing enough food for everyone to eat. At some point in the past, in the film's timeline, at some point in the past, there was a great societal collapse because there wasn't enough food to be eaten, and now everybody's a farmer, and they're all farming corn.
Yeah, because none of the other, like we've run out of plants that are resistant to diseases.
Yeah, they start. the film with somebody burning an okra field, and saying that that was the last year that would be had. And a few scenes later, we're revealed that there's going to be a blight on corn. Um,
Eventually, yeah.
Eventually, yeah.
But
So
there apparently is no synthetic production of food, and it's just these farmers doing their best with these crops.
yeah, it's interesting. It's certainly the first time I've seen like a post-apocalypse film that like has a post-apocalypse where we figured some shit out. Uh, like
Yeah.
like you could have had a whole movie that was Matthew McConaughey in the food wars with Jonathan Lithgow and then his wife, um, and them trying to start a family in that mess. And that would have been totally different because it would have been an apocalypse movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and this movie also does the thing where they don't really tell you what actually happened. They just kind of allude to, some kind of like apocalyptic event that led to, I think they mention like people being firebombed because they were hungry or something, as part of a war. But beyond that, they really don't go into what happened to get to this point.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense as a in-world thing. Like we all know the history of what's been going on. We don't need that exposition dump, but we do have a bit of an exposition dump when Matthew McConaughey goes to his children's school and has a conversation with the principal and another faculty member about like the future of his children. Um, and they say, his son can, be a farmer and that's fine. And they've ruled out the prospects of college for him because they don't need more engineers in the world, and they need farmers. And they're upset at his daughter for bringing in an old textbook about the moon landing because they've rewritten the propaganda that is American textbooks to say the moon landing was a fraud. It would existed only to bankrupt the Soviets into making their own space program. So that way, children would no longer be looking towards the stars for enlightenment and exploration and fulfillment, and have tried to make a more fulfilling life of their own on Earth.
Yeah, which I thought was an interesting spin on, a popular conspiracy theory that, we faked the moon landing, which we did not. We really did go to the moon. It happened. Um, yeah, so I thought that was an interesting little thing to put in there. But going back to the brother, I thought that, they're like, oh, well, college isn't for him. They only let in so many people because we need farmers. But a lot of farmers go to college for agriculture. So I thought that was kind of like an oversimplification of, the employment of farmers process, especially if you're living in a world where food production is so difficult. The people who are farming should be like really well educated on what they're doing.
Yes, I 100% agree, especially because Matthew McConaughey, him and his family, they steal a down drone, and they are going to take its like solar panels and use that on their farm, but they take an artificial intelligence unit from the drone and they put it into their combine tractors. And so you have to be able to program, electrical engineer, and do all that sort of stuff on a combine tractor to do your farming. And
Hmm.
uh, that takes a college education.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is kind of like the way that that whole scene was written was is kind of from a place of naivete, I think.
Yeah,
In that because the point that they were making is like, oh, your kid can't go to college because we need, farm laborers and they don't have to be educated. Whereas like that's not really true. So, yeah, I mean that scene kind of bothered me.
yeah. It, but it helps you get the get world building across. I guess it cuts some
Yeah,
corners
yeah.
there. Um, And in this part of the film, we're introduced to our supernatural element. There is a spooky ghost, and
Woo!
it is knocking books off of shelves and making messages in the dust and breaking stuff. We'll need to get Zach Baggins in on it to get a clear idea of what's going on.
Yeah, I hope there's still ghost hunting in the future post-apocalyptic world.
Well, if they don't need engineers, I don't think they're gonna need ghost adventurers.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Disappointing.
But I imagine there will still be woods to go out and hunt Bigfoot in. So luckily we'll still have that genre of television.
Yeah, I imagine Bigfoot will live through the apocalypse.
Yes, obviously. So we later find out how these messages and things are being communicated, and the ghost that's responsible. But the ghost gives them a couple messages at the beginning that include stay and the coordinates for a military secret.
Yes, and the coordinates like that is an interesting way to get your protagonist to your secret military base. I mean, that's something that a lot of these movies have to come up with something for. Like, how do you get the everyman to the place where the spaceship takes off from? Like
Right.
in Armageddon. How do you get the everyman, which is Bruce Willis, onto the spaceship? Well, you got to have this elaborate plot about, drilling a atomic bomb into the asteroid. So, I mean, in this way, they use the ghosts send the coordinates, and then Matthew McConaughey and his daughter drive to the site of the coordinates, which turns out to be secret NASA base.
Yes, so in this future, NASA no longer exists because you need to spend money on food, not space stuff. So NASA exists in secret in an underground facility somewhere.
Yeah, probably not too far away from wherever they are.
Wherever that is, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think
this
we're,
this vague Midwestern flat place.
but they drive through like some almost like mountains. I don't know. It could be Colorado or like Montana or something. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Probably Colorado because you definitely get the Dust Bowl through there, because that's on the western side of the Great Plains. Um, there's flat and there's mountains and shit.
Yeah.
Also, interestingly, if America ever faces a dire nuclear catastrophe and we lose the ability to exist in Washington, D.C., the capital will be moved to Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, there's many a science fiction book or movie have explored those options.
Yeah. So at the NASA base, we meet a couple of our other big stars here. We meet Anne Hathaway and Michael Caine, who are scientists, and they're basically working on a plan for the future of humanity.
Yeah, they have plan A and plan B.
Yeah. So Plan A is solving some mathematical gravity equation that would allow them to launch a superstructure that is a big space station.
Yeah, and that way, people from Earth would be saved.
Yes. And Plan B, which is more sci-fi-ish, a little bit more fantasy, as we'll come to talk about, is
I mean, I think plan A is pretty fantasy, Garrett.
so yes, we'll get to that. We'll
Okay.
get to that. So plan B is there has been a wormhole that has opened up near Saturn that they have sent some probes into and realized it goes to a few different galaxies, and they've sent people there to the to the solar systems to go to planets to scope them out if they're good for human life. And plan B is to send some people there with habitats and embryos and incubators and stuff to be able to start to repopulate the human race and spread it outside the bounds of Earth.
Yeah, in a kind of it reminded me a little bit of like what they were doing with on The Martian, and also what was that show? I can't remember it now. It was with the families that go to space, Lost in Space. I think it's called Lost in Space. But they had kind of like pods and science stuff to really like, set up a civilization elsewhere.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I don't know how practical that is, but that's their hope.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, if this would actually work, but I think it's a pretty good plan. And I think that a lot of my feelings about this movie are that I somehow am able to suspend my disbelief, even though I can't deal with a guy wearing a superhero mask. I can't suspend my disbelief for that, but I can suspend my disbelief for this, to be able to like imagine that these plans might actually work and result in saving humanity.
Yeah. So, in order to enact any of these plans, we need our heroes Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, another scientist named Doyle, and another one named Romley to go on a space mission to visit one of the solar systems that has a black hole. So, hopefully, they can learn more about gravity from that thing and investigate the three planets there that they have already sent explorers to.
Yeah, and they sent out a bunch of explorers, um, and this was several years prior, like
Yeah, yeah, we don't know.
17 or so.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We don't know exactly how long they've all been doing things, but it's this project has been a long time in the making.
Yeah, and it's super secret. They haven't told anybody. Nobody knows. Because, I mean, if everybody's gonna die anyway, why, no. And why have the risk that people will find out and it'll turn into like 2012 where everybody's trying to get on the spaceship and not everybody can?
Yeah, that was a boat, but yeah, yeah, same idea.
It was a spaceship, Garrett. I mean, they launched the boat from Mount Everest or something really dumb.
No, no, I thought it was a big boat, and then it was going to just outlive the flood. I didn't think it was a spaceship.
Well, I mean, yeah,
You,
it was a boat, but it was more spaceship adjacent.
okay, okay. Well, we're going to hear from Garrett in post production, and he's going to have the information. Damn it.
I'm
Um,
sorry, to Garrett in post production, it was a boat.
Hello, this is Garrett in post production, and I have watched some videos, analyzed the footage, and read from the official 2012 fan wiki, and can tell you with certainty that they were indeed boats, they were arcs that eventually wind up at the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, because that becomes the next highest place on the planet after all the disasters that befuddle us in 2012. Uh, it's now 2023 and none of those things have happened yet. And if they did, I have forgotten. Um, so to start on this mission, they get in a rocket and they blast off. So let's talk about spaceships.
Well, I mean, yeah, yeah, we can. They had a very emotional goodbye. before he blasts off. But
Okay.
then we have a very great sequence of blasting off, and it was so well done. I mean, so much of this movie is just so well done visually, and the pacing of it is fantastic. And then we have this amazing spaceship, which is really cool.
Yeah, so this spaceship, the Endurance, which is the big ring, is based in some parts in reality. They used a lot of ideas for what the International Space Station has with its like pods and modularity and how that works, and the combination of like tactile buttons, levers, and things like that, but then also like computer systems and joysticks and things like that that we see. Um, I think it's a very fantastically designed thing. So a couple things about these spaceships. So they made big ass miniatures for these in order to show them more authentically, because if it just this feels more real than anything in the new Star Wars movies, just in look.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it even you can also get the lighting so well on a on something like this, where you have one sun shining on this, this spaceship in miniature. You have one light shining on it, and it picks up, the different things as it spins in different ways. Yeah, I mean, as we say over and over on this podcast, miniatures for the win.
Yeah. So the Endurance was 25 feet wide, and they made a pyrotechnic uh, part of it that was even bigger than that for a scene later on where some serious damage occurs. Um, and they also made the Ranger and the Lander. And the Ranger, they made a version that was 45 feet long, which I don't know. That kind of seems like how big it is. The Ranger's the ship they fly around in. Um, but I'm sure they made different versions of it for like scenes where they're coming in and out of it, and then a whole different one that's just like the cockpit and them buzzing around. But having these like big tactile things makes them seem a lot more real in the scenes. And because of their size, they were also able to attach IMAX cameras to them. So it gave you like a documentary look, or like, kind of like something out of Fast and the Furious, where you have cameras mounted on your cars. And really, I think helps the action, especially on the water planet where the uh, Ranger gets lifted and lowered by the waves. I think that just gives an awesome look to it all.
Yeah, that was some really cool cinematography there.
This is something I wanted to bring up because when I watched this, so they launch in the Ranger on a rocket ship, like a three-stage, big fuel, big, rocket ship, like we're very used to from, NASA. And that's the only time we see something like that, is using it to get out of Earth's atmosphere, and then it ends up traveling to the Endurance, docking on that, and then they take that all the way to Saturn, which takes 2 years. And I have one problem with this. Never again, when we're entering or exiting the atmosphere with the Ranger or the Lander, do they use a big ass rocket to get out of the to escape the gravitational pull of these planets.
Yeah, and that's something that, like the Martian, like a lot of the plot in The Martian revolves around how does he get off the planet, and because the spaceship already left once. So, you have to like in their solution there was to drop a another whole like rocket thing on the planet in advance so that they could use that to leave.
Yeah.
Because like when we landed on the moon, we didn't have to because the moon doesn't have much gravity, it was relatively easy to get off of the moon and come back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like so that problem has not been solved by our systems. And like did they use that scene propelling off of Earth just to have that kind of gratuitous, escape velocity scene that, you know, tells us it's a space movie and then never use it again? Or was there some kind of science reason behind it? Like, oh, maybe they didn't want to use the fuel on the ship in order to get up there? I don't know.
Now, if it was about launching the Endurance, which is this giant ring thing, I would believe that more because we never see that big spaceship take off or land. But
Hmm.
we specifically have a docking scene where the rocket where their ranger is docking onto it, which means that was already up there.
Yeah.
It's
And it
it's a
makes sense that that
yeah,
was prepared in advance, modularly over time, in
yeah,
advance of this mission.
yes.
So
It's
yeah, this
very
this is
reason
our one of
yeah.
our few science doesn't quite make sense moments in this movie.
This ship very reasonably could have been the thing that transported the original Lazarus mission people to the wormhole in the first place, and it came back to Earth. You know, uh,
Yeah.
we're not clear at all on the timeline there. Um, but yeah, it's so strange that they would have a rocket and then never do that again and not really explain it, because fuel use is a plot point that comes up in not having enough fuel to visit all the planets and things like that. um it's very strange, it's very odd, but that's okay. So we have another great effect in this film, which are robots.
Yeah, this film does what I love about sci-fi and gives us a fun, charismatic, sarcastic robot or
Yes,
two.
a couple of them, yeah, Tars and Case.
And they are just so unique in their design and their movement and their humor. They're not, quite the depressed robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or the, psychotic robot of Space Odyssey. But they give us something, they give us so much in a movie that, has few actors in it. So they're another, two actors as part of the ensemble cast in space.
Yes, so these were designed with Christopher Nolan's input, and he didn't want to make anthropomorphic robots because, having another C-3PO, just isn't that interesting. Um,
Yeah, and I think the best robots are not ones that look like humans.
yeah, it helps you separate them from, oh, it's a guy in a golden suit, to the hell is that thing? That's a robot right there. Um, So the robot's made of these like big blocks, and it has a couple screens on it. In our picture here, they're not lit, but the two black things are screens. And there are a couple like just excellent scenes of showing how they like function and operate, where they can just like turn into like a pinwheel thing and just roll around, or their like modular arms fold out and they can control different parts of the spaceship, or when they're like docked into the Ranger, they have like their own like bed thing that they slot into, and they like interface with the ship. It's really cool. They're so much of a part of all of the like space stuff, and they're integrated so well with the cast and the technology. They've really helped this futuristic space exploration come alive.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent design, excellent use of robot. And they do perform, more than just normal functions. They have them, they have the ability to control their humor and their honesty and make sure it's not, 100% or whatever, and change it so that, they have companions in addition to their, companions on the ship.
Yeah,
And
and
then, I mean, they do good things for the crew.
oh yeah, they have. you know, some really excellent emotional scenes where they convey like, oh, you know, a person's died or something's gone wrong, or you know, trying to break the reality of the situation. They're really great stand-ins for, you know, another scientist or something like that they could have had.
Yeah. Or navigationist, um, captain, driver of the ship, that kind of character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to talk about before we get on to our next slide is a little bit about the music. Um, so ever since one of our listeners asked us to talk more about the music, I've been listening more for the music. And there's this initial docking scene where Cooper is docking with the Endurance, the spaceship, and it has first of all, the whole music score of this film is very great. It's remains pretty consistent throughout and has like a lot of similar like themes between the songs. But the scene where they're docking, it has a very orchestral feeling that reminds me a lot of 2001: A Space Odyssey when the um, ship there is flying into the spinning ring ship that they have um, in that scene. A nice callback to what very likely inspired huge portions of this and other scientific, communities and movies and media.
Yeah. Yeah, this score is excellent. I've listened to it on its own before, for sure. And Nolan, as we mentioned during Oppenheimer, not only does he do sound well, but he does the lack of sound and silence well. And this movie is one of those where silence in space is so important, and he harnesses that in very pivotal moments in order to create emphasis by having no sound.
Absolutely. Because in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah, they can't hear your spaceship crash into the other spaceship either.
So our next slide is simply called emotional turmoil.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's, hormones or what, but when I was watching this movie, I was just a weeping pile of mess because there is just so much emotion in this film, and it comes from, you know, having to leave behind Earth and your family, and then having to watch them grow old and suffer and experiencing death and difficulty in the a whole life of difficulty of your loved one experienced in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, that definitely brought tears to my eyes. Um, so this whole section of emotional turmoil really starts when we're on the water world, and we get a scene where Anne Hathaway is like she's trying to get some data log or something, and they're having a race against time about a wave that's coming at them and it's going to crash. And the robot saves her, and the other astronaut, Doyle, he's down there, and he gets swept away in the flood and presumably dies. Despite the fact that he's in a spacesuit, but I imagine the wall of water would have enough force to crush him. Not even just drown him, but total crush. Um,
Yeah, I did think that the loss of Doyle was kind of understated, but it was understated by the emotional turmoil of them arriving back on the Endurance, and suddenly 20 years have passed thanks to the wonders of uh, the black hole.
Relativity.
Yeah, relativity. There we go.
Yeah.
Science.
Yeah, so in that time, our other science guy, Romley, he was studying the black hole, and he decided at many points to just, not um, sleep in the. They have like a cryo sleeping thing where they get in a tub and something science happens. Um, and they can just sleep for months at a time. Because the biggest thing that prevents us from doing big space travel missions is if you're in this enclosed space with people for so long, you're not gonna like them. And
Yeah, you're gonna get sick of them real quick. That's where you got to turn the honesty function down on your robot.
yeah, I mean, if you've ever been on a car ride vacation for, more than a couple days with your family, you start to understand this kind of idea. And imagine if you can't get off at the rest stop to, have a breath of fresh air away from them. You know, that's space for you. And we really see that have an effect on Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway's character because Matthew McConaughey is skeptical. He believes there's some ulterior motive for her character because he believes, rightfully so, that she is infatuated with one of the original explorers, um, and that she's going to be gunning for going and visiting him to rekindle their romance.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately he wants to get back to Earth in order to see his daughter again and his son and his grandkids.
Yeah, that he now
They,
learns he has.
mhm. So they're able to, so Earth is able to send messages to them, but they can't send messages to Earth for some dumb reason. And in that way, he finds out, everything that's happened over the last 20 years. And I think it's, seeing Matthew McConaughey crying, about this and about his daughter, not wanting to talk to him and not forgiving him for leaving. And then his son giving up and saying, like, oh, well, I think you just left us. I don't believe you're ever coming home because I haven't heard from you. And meanwhile, this has all taken place in Matthew McConaughey's mind. He had the days in between getting to the Endurance and going into cryosleep. He had 2 years of sleep. Then he had a day of going through the black hole, getting on the other side, going to the stupid water planet, and coming back. So, like, 5 days have passed in his mind, but 20 years have passed 22 years in the eyes of his children.
Yeah, just crazy. Um,
Yeah.
and in that we learned that Jonathan Lithgow, he's dead. Uh, his son's first child has died, and it's just an awful string of events for him to have to absorb. And then his daughter sends him a message that's like, "I'm as old now as you were when you left, and you're not coming back." And they have a moment there where like he has to watch them grieve his death, which I can't imagine for anyone in any scenario that be a healthy or you know acceptable thing to do. That just sounds like the worst thing in the world to have to witness.
Yeah, I'd be able to see people grieving you. Like, it would be like if you were in a coma and you could see what everybody was thinking and doing around you before they, pulled the plug or something.
Yeah, just
That's the
terrible.
only analogous situation I can imagine. But very, very sad. I mean, this movie has a lot of that, of just grief.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, that's what the whole movie or the whole, plan A and plan B are about is, well, we're all gonna have to grieve, but are we grieving for the death of people on Earth or are we grieving for the death of the entire human race? Um,
Hmm.
that's definitely, you know, that I think that helps get Matthew McConaughey's character to that point of realizing he's grieving for everyone now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the emotions all return when we get to the end as well. But
Yeah. So after this scene, the remaining scientists have to decide what they're going to do, whether they're going to go and see this planet that Anne Hathaway's love interest is on, or if they're going to go to the planet that basically the captain of the whole expedition he's on and is saying, yeah, come here, check this out. We got some good shit. Um, and they decide that they're going to go and check on the captain, who is our surprise Matt Damon, and
Yeah.
they wake
Yeah, and
him up
this
from cryo sleep.
Yeah, and Matt Damon is surprised to see them, but elated because he just wants to get off this planet and hatches an elaborate scheme to try and kill Matthew McConaughey, who, he sees as a rival and as somebody who wants to leave and get back to Earth. And he knows that everybody's going to be pissed the fuck off when they realize that his planet is shitty, unlivable, and they're going to have to go someplace else anyway.
Yeah, that's easily the worst part. Is Matt Damon's character, Dr. Mann, is just a liar, um, and he goes out of his way to like rig his robot to explode should anybody try to get the data on it that says, yeah, this planet fucking sucks. Um, and in in that situation, Romley gets caught in the blast, and Anne Hathaway goes off to save our dying Matthew McConaughey, and Matt Damon steals a rocket ship.
Yeah, so I think Matt Damon takes, because there's two rocket ships now, and I thought one exploded, but maybe they were in some kind of like pop-up tent situation on the planet. But yeah, so Matthew McConaughey takes his spaceship and tries to dock it on the Endurance, but the robot saves the day by turning off the auto pilot function on that spaceship to be able to dock. And
Yep.
so Matthew McConaughey has to try and do it himself, and he's not as good as Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah. Matt Damon kind of fucks it up with his hubris, um, and ends up exploding part of their spaceship.
And then
Um,
we get a fabulous scene of Matthew McConaughey trying to dock his spaceship on the now rapidly spinning out of control Endurance.
yeah, it's an amazingly, horrible scene. It's
Stressful.
it's punctuated by the excellent score. There's these fantastic visuals of the spaceship spinning around and catching the light and reflections of the icy planet they were on. Um, it's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's a quality space scene. And I mean, they could have done without this whole plot line or this scene, but I think that it's one of the things that elevates it in the, realm of space movies and science fiction. Because I think that most directors and, science fiction production, if you're on a science fiction production team, you're thinking pretty early on about like how are you going to make the spaceship scene in your movie one that people are going to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely need that spectacle.
Hmm. And
Um,
the risk, like it's one of those like anxiety inducing scenes because we've seen 100 science fiction movies where everybody dies because of some stupid thing.
yeah. And if they can't dock with the ship before it, drifts away, then they are fucked.
Yeah, fully.
Um,
Not that they're not pretty much fucked anyway, but they
right,
figure
right.
out a way to get away after they do dock.
Yeah. So slightly before this happens, we get our final big emotional turmoil where Michael Caine, he dies in the film, and he reveals to uh, Matthew McConaughey's daughter, Jessica Chastain, that Plan A was a lie the whole time, and that they were never going to solve the gravity equation to launch these superstructures, and that Matthew McConaughey was never going to return. That was never in the plans, in the cards, and that sets everybody on edge. Um,
Yeah, because Matthew McConaughey didn't know that. And, apparently they just wanted him for his, space driving ability.
yeah, and Anne Hathaway, that's her dad, so she's depressed about it, and she apparently never knew that it was a lie anyway. And
But Matthew McConaughey doesn't believe that
right,
because,
because Matt Damon apparently knows that that was the plan all along, was that they were going to have to repopulate the human race out here. Um, he was very gung
which,
ho about that.
and going back to so the emotional idea of leaving Earth all by yourself and going out all by yourself to this planet, knowing that there is a 90% chance that you're never going to see another human again. Making that decision would be a lot easier if you knew that everybody on Earth was going to die anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like you could possibly be a lot more hopeful about it. Like, I am humanity's hope. It's resting
Hmm.
on me. If I don't do this, we're gonna have to find somebody else who will.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, especially with the world being in such a shitty state too, I think that that also helps, but you know.
Yeah. So interspersed with some of the scenes in the later half of the movie are scenes of Jessica Chastain on Earth, and interacting with Michael Caine, doing some science stuff, interacting with Topher Grace, doing some science stuff. Um, and they go back to the family farm, and it turns out that uh, their kids there are sick, and everybody has a cough, and there are all of these people that are leaving the area because of the huge dust storms, and it's just a terrible place to be. And it seems like the only place that's livable is that underground bunker that NASA's in. Um, at least that's what Cooper's son, played by Casey Affleck, at this point in time, is saying that we don't want to go live underground.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into easily the most like fanciful part of the movie, where we talk about the Tesseract and black holes and space ghost.
Yeah. So with a very emotional, and pseudoscience-y kind of like we're going to drive the spaceship around the black hole and then slingshot it out to the planet where we want to see if we can plant the eggs on it. They do that, and Matthew McConaughey, surprise, breaks off and flies into the black hole.
Yes, and he does this along with one of the robots in an effort to gather the data that's in the black hole to be able to send it back to Earth and have them have the information. Um,
Hmm.
it's speculated early on that there's something past the event horizon inside the black hole that could be something by someone. Um, the speculation is by somebody, not that there's this constructed thing inside the black hole. That's not inferred.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of like weird science, pseudoscience about a them that put the black hole there and the them that, made the gravitational anomaly in order to convince, Matthew McConaughey to come to the NASA place. And so
well,
there is this kind of like supernatural alien kind of assumption that's happening.
yeah. So The wormhole, I think, is made by these beings. That's them. Everything that happens on Matthew McConaughey's farm is caused by Matthew McConaughey while he's in what's referred to as the Tesseract, which is a representation of fourth,
Time and space
yeah,
and yeah.
of fourth dimensional space that's able to be traversed by and interacted with by third dimensional being. It's very complicated in a way that many of Christopher Nolan's movies are complicated, in that like there's a concept here and it's it's dumbed down enough to where you can understand it, but is such like a mind fuck of an idea that even the biggest minds in the world now couldn't you know explain it.
Yeah, yeah, it's complicated and full of, I'm assuming, supernatural pseudoscience-y kind of concepts. But in that way, this movie is a fantasy movie in a similar way to Inception's a fantasy, or
Yeah,
Tenet.
yeah,
Like this is a, science-based fantasy moment that he goes in here and is able to manipulate his daughter's bedroom through his interactions with this Tesseract.
yeah. And so he's able to he kind of like views different points in his life and through like Murphy's eyes in there. And he turns out he was the one that left the message that was like stay. And then once he realized, oh shit, I can't convince her to stay because I tried to before and that didn't work. So I have to give myself the NASA coordinates. And he gets that from the robot that's also in this, place. He's communicating through his headset. That part's kind of weird, but the robot seems to understand that this is something that was created for him. I don't know. That part was strange. Um, and then he's able to like, transmit that to himself to get him set on this journey in the first place, which causes a causality loop of well, time is a flat circle kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
and then he gets the robot to transcribe data, and then he encodes the data in a watch that leaves the room, and like she takes with her to go back to the science lab to like do the science stuff. And I don't know, that's sort of where this idea kind of loses me of how that's possible, but I don't make watches, so I don't know.
Well, so he encodes the data in binary. So takes she just writes down the code that's in the watch.
But no, it's encoded on the second hand. Like it's not like he's programming a watch. This is a spring operated watch.
No, I think that's what's happening. The watch, the second hand is wiggling in a binary
Yeah,
code.
yeah. But how does I don't under like okay, I totally understand it if he's doing it the whole time. And like she's there from when it starts to when it ends
I
and
think
is
it
writing all of it
repeats.
down.
It's on a repeat.
Okay, well, I don't know if the science is in on that, if we can make a watch do that.
I think repeats the only way that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. That is the only
I
way that
think
makes sense.
anything can happen in the Tesseract, okay? You think it, you can make it happen.
Okay, fair, fair. Um, so he sends out this information, and once he gets it done, the Tesseract closes, which means that like the higher dimensional beings have been like, okay, we got Matthew McConaughey to like do the thing we needed him to do that he already did, or that he always will do. Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and then well, we're just gonna let him go, and they shove him back through the wormhole uh, with the spaceship and stuff, and then he gets picked up by Space Force, later on, about 125, 150 years after he left, because that's how long he's been gone thanks to relativity.
Yeah, so I don't really understand how he lives through that, but he does, like whatever. And they pick him up, and suddenly he's on his space station that's named after, he thinks himself, but it's actually his daughter.
Yes, who was able to use the information that she got from the watch to launch the spaceship that the NASA building is. Um, and this is where it gets really into space fantasy in my mind, is that they've somehow used this gravitational equation to be able to launch the spaceship, which like is really silly then why the spaceship is what it is.
Yeah,
So,
but it's
so
cool.
yes, so in the next slide I have a picture. It's also the what did we learn section. Um, so if you'll notice, the spaceship is a big ring. It's a big curve thing,
It's
and
like a Mobius,
he
kind of.
no,
No.
a Mobius strip is a plane that just has is a loop thing that
Well,
has one
okay.
side.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just bizarrely shaped in a way that
Yes.
doesn't make a lot of sense.
So so I can explain the science behind this because it's the same
Oh,
science that we see on the Endurance. So if you want to make gravity in space, one thing you can do is have a circle and have that circle spin. So at the center of the circle, and this is the exact same thing that makes the spaceship in a 2001 A Space Odyssey have gravity, is if you have a circle and it's spinning, there is a force that is pulling things to the outside. There is a force that would be pulling you out. And if you're standing on the ground, like in the picture that Matthew McConaughey, they're walking on the inside of the curve because as it's spinning, there is a force that is pulling them out, that's pulling them down. I think it's called centrifugal force. Now, we can make one of these tomorrow, or we could have made it yesterday. These are not like that high concept of a science fiction thing to make. It's just that making things that go to making things this big that go in space is really, really, really expensive. Um, and I guess that's part of the reason why they built the things on Earth and then had to get the gravity equation to get them out. But if like the whole idea is we've built this thing and we can build it and we've already been sending things into space, they could have built this in secret in space. It would have been way more expensive, but like I don't see why they couldn't have done it.
well, yeah. I mean, maybe just like launching it from Earth was, I don't know. I'm gonna blame the capitalists, I guess.
Yeah, the problem with this and with a lot of space stuff is just it costs a shitload of money until we have the infrastructure there to do it. Like if we had, you know, refineries and mining operations for asteroids and shit and could build stuff and cast metal in space, we could have a space station tomorrow. But we don't. And you might be asking, well, why isn't there gravity on the International Space Station? And that's because the International Space Station is falling all the time. It's not rotating around anything, it's just falling. And that's why everything's floating. Um,
Yeah, because it's in an orbit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a totally different thing. You can't have this sort of thing work and also like falling around Earth. Or maybe you could. I think you could, but it's it
Dude,
spinning thing
I went to art history school, not science school.
spinning things have moving parts and moving parts break a lot, which is
Oh,
one
yeah.
reason why, you know, the having something that like rotates is kind of fucked. Um, but anyway, like the the story ends and we're on this space station and Matthew McConaughey gets to reunite with his daughter. which is an incredibly emotional moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and ultimately too, his decision to, or her urging him to go back through the wormhole again too is also very emotional.
Yeah, so after they like see each other again, she's like, I've already grieved for you. You shouldn't have to watch your children die. Go off and go on another adventure. And it's implied that he steals a shuttle, goes back to the wormhole, and goes and visits Anne Hathaway's planet where she's set up the colony already on a planet that I think she can walk around without her helmet on.
Yeah, because it turns out that her gut instinct was correct.
Yes, which brings us to the doofiest thing in this movie, which is
Hey.
love is a concept that can uh, go between dimensions and time and space, and
Well, I mean, it can because it's an emotion that has nothing to do with spatial planes or time.
look, I just think it's a little goofy.
Well, I mean, yes, and I think I thought it was goofy then too, but I mean, when I saw it the first time. But I mean, and even I think you told me that this was like a theme a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I don't remember that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, her point, I think, was more like overall that this is one of those, like we're humans and, it's part of humanity to love each other and want to, you know, continue the race.
yeah, even if you yourself aren't procreating, you have the drive to help others, unless you're a disgusting capitalist.
Or Matthew Damon.
Yeah, or Matt Damon. Yeah.
Because I think
Well,
his plan was just to go back to Earth.
I, yeah, he was. Well, I think his plan was to go and investigate one of the other places, but like he was definitely going to seize control, and he wanted to be around people again. He was a lonely boy. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it could have been that he wanted to go to the other planet, but I really think he wanted to go back to Earth and tell him that, none of the planets worked out. Everybody else died. It was terrible. He saved the day by returning to Earth with data or something. I don't know.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess what we learned here is, love conquers all again. I'll just splice in what we learned from Titanic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the point about like love being not just romantic love is important here. Like the love that Anne Hathaway is talking about, I think is more about familial love, and I mean that's certainly how Matt Damon sees it. Like he's doing all of this for his children and for his daughter and for humanity and the people he left behind. And she's doing this for her father and then, the continuation of the human race, knowing that she's likely never going to see anyone again, which has got to be rough.
Yeah,
Like, imagine raising all of those babies by yourself.
I I'm taking the Titanic service pistol route again.
Yeah, that's not for me. I wouldn't have signed up for that job, even if it meant, living. Now, I might have signed up for the job of going out there to check it out to begin with, to just be alone and die. But,
Yeah, yeah. This paints a picture of such a bleak future of like, yeah, there's going to be, generations of people that are living on these space stations or living in these like really, honestly, very primitive societies, that are
hmm
on these worlds, and who knows how long it'll take to return to any kind of like, what we have now. And Matthew McConaughey kind of points that out when he's on the space station and is like, why did you guys make it look like it was? Like, why on earth would you do that? Um, like this idea of what Earth was, if you've abandoned it, if it's not sustainable, why would you keep the ways of life that made it that way?
Yeah, why create a monument to, a such a terrible time in history of this, Dust Bowl and corn? Like, why would anyone ever, if all you could eat for years was corn, and then you got we figured it out, you know, why would you go back to eating corn?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like once you, I guess, launch the spaceships, we can steal some seeds from the seed repository and then like, grow these crops in a controlled environment. Um, now I don't think that the blight would be unstoppable, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't really understand why they couldn't do that underground or something too. Like, yeah, I mean maybe it's a production quantity issue. Like I think about, like in Blade Runner, the second Blade Runner, where they're, have the farm of the goop, the protein goop. Like I think that that is closer to what a reality would be than just like perpetual corn farming.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna need some kind of organics to do that, but who knows exactly what those would
Yeah,
be.
but I mean like we're gonna be eating, like dried worms,
I'm not,
crickets,
but okay. Yeah.
crickets, larvae, those kind of proteins. Like that kind of
Right, right.
protein goop is what, that's what I mean. Like we're gonna be
Yeah,
eating that.
yeah.
Yeah, not ideal.
No. As much of like a, you know, science fiction story, this is such a bleak world. And it's not painted that way necessarily. This isn't the dark, gritty cyberpunk world of Blade Runner. This isn't the like dystopian worlds. Like this is a bit too real.
Yeah, and I mean it plays on, the American dream and the American Midwest and the like having the house with the picket fence and the cornfields and all that, which, like having that be the bleak future. And, it plays on the Dust Bowl and having to pick up all your stuff and get in a caravan and go somewhere else and abandon, all of these very a simple way of life, I guess, too.
Yeah,
There's kind of that romanticism of a simpler way of life where farmers don't have to go to engineering school,
yeah.
and that has to be left behind, but at the same time that's what's causing the catastrophe to begin with.
Yeah, talking about this, it's starting to get muddy, you know.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
really know what we learned. I guess we learned let's not create the ecological catastrophe that's going to necessitate us eventually somehow evolving into fifth dimensional beings to eventually save ourselves. Let's not do that.
yeah, I think that's not ideal. I think that the other thing about this movie is, and it's this is something that I thought about, I think maybe yesterday or maybe the day before, when I said like I'd like to record this podcast soon because I'm gonna forget, everything that happened in the movie, because that's just a me problem. That's not a movie problem. But I think that this movie is one of those movies that captures your attention totally,
Uh-huh.
and you can totally immerse yourself in it. But then when you pick it apart afterward, you start to see its flaws and issues, and that those issues and flaws don't get in the way of you experiencing it in the moment, but in the end, it can, mess with your brain a bit.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. It, this is one of those, it's great in the moment. Once you start to scrutinize it, you start to really question a lot of it.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like, I think that there is a great place for those kinds of movies. I mean, I enjoyed this movie thoroughly when I was watching it. I cried. I was happy. I mean, I was immersed in the cornfield realness of the Midwest that I sometimes occasionally miss. Um, but yeah, that there are some issues, and I think that that's one of those things about these Christopher Nolan movies is you just have to treat them as fantasy. You can't, dig too deep because ultimately they're not that deep of a movie. Like you don't need to, there's certain movies like not Game of Thrones is a movie, but that's something that you can dig deep and talk about and like try to uncover stones as the seasons progress.
Right.
But this movie, just take it at its face value. It's an incredible film. It's immersive, it's interesting, it's fun, and it doesn't need you to dig apart and pull it apart because in its package, it's a good film.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Well, I guess that's where we're gonna leave it for today. If you want a good experience, this is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, incredibly beautiful, incredibly great sounds, lack of sounds, emotional. The acting is incredible. Matthew McConaughey, Matt Damon, um, Anne Hathaway, and what was the daughter's name?
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah, Jessica Chastain. Really incredible acting, and you know, like they bring it in a way that a lot of films just miss the mark on. So, for all its flaws, great film. Let's hope we don't get to this future.
Yeah. So let's do better.
Yep, let's do better. Let's not kill the planet, please. If you can do something to avoid killing the planet today, you should try that. We will make an attempt as well.
Yes. Well, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. We don't know what's coming out next, but we have a big plan for something in the works in about a month. So
Yep.
you'll be excited for that. We hope you enjoyed last week's episode on the Fifth Element, and check the description below, and I'll probably tease what's coming out next week.
Yeah, and like, comment, subscribe, thumbs up, write a review, whatever you need to do to promote the podcast, and share with your friends if you enjoyed this or if you know somebody who likes this movie and likes to talk about it or likes any of our other films that we've reviewed. Let us know, share it, and we look forward to talking about the next one.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.